What would you do if you had 10 years to live? How would you act? How would you live? What if it was 4 years? What if it was 14 months? What if it was 4 months? Would you live more fully every day? Every moment? Would you prioritize your work differently or your relationships? What is important to you? Who is important to you? Are you acting now as if those things and those beings are important? I'll talk primarily about 5 topics today. 1, habitat for human animals. 2, civilization as a heat engine. 3, the catch-22 of terminating civilization. 4, the 6th mass extinction on Earth. And 5, how we respond to a terminal diagnosis. First up, what is habitat? According to the first definition in my Merriam-Webster online dictionary, habitat is, quote, the place or environment where a plant or animal naturally or normally lives and grows, end quote. I'm Professor Emeritus of Conservation Biology, and I largely agree with this simplistic definition. Habitat is one of the 3 pillars of conservation biology, along with speciation and extinction. Speciation is the process of how, when, and with what ancestors a species comes into existence. For example, our favorite species, Homo sapiens, came into existence about 200,000 years ago, is descended from earlier members of the genus Homo, all of which are now extinct, and is currently represented by nearly 7.5 billion specimens. Some of these specimens were clever enough to choose their parents and their date and place of birth in a manner that allowed them to seek degrees in law at a certain university in Australia. Good move. Extinction is the process by which a species meets its demise. So far, more than 99% of the species to appear on Earth have gone extinct. Based on substantial evidence, our own species is headed into the abyss of extinction far sooner than most people realize. According to James Hansen, the godfather of climate science, we've had humans on the planet up to about 2 degrees Celsius above the 1750 baseline, or the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, when the planetary temperature was about 13.5 degrees. Hansen reported this conclusion in a legal brief filed on August 12, 2015. I suspect 2 degrees C above the 1750 baseline is the maximum temperature at which we will have habitat for humans on Earth. We're currently at least 1.6 degrees above the 1750 baseline. No species persists long without habitat, not even the clever ones. Indeed, a synthetic paper written by Oliver Tickell and published in The Guardian on August 11, 2008, concluded via headline, quote, on a planet 4C hotter, all we can prepare for is extinction, end quote. And he's referring to 4 degrees Celsius above the 1750 baseline, or 13.5 degrees Celsius. That 4C number seems a tad high to me, and the paper goes on to explain that humans will persist up to 6C above the 1750 baseline, thus about 19.5 degrees C. I doubt there will be a tree on the planet, or much other complex life, with a rapid rise to 17.5 C. But we don't know, because we've never experienced Earth with humans at anything close to 4C above baseline, much less at 6C above baseline, which is about 19.5 degrees Celsius. That's the planetary average temperature. On to item 2, civilization as a heat engine. Tim Garrett is a professor of atmospheric sciences at the University of Utah. He has been studying the thermodynamics of civilization for several years and wrote the signature paper on the topic in 2007. In that and subsequent papers, Garrett concluded that civilization itself is a heat engine. His initial paper on the topic was submitted in 2007, rejected by 10 different journals, and finally accepted for publication in the prestigious journal Climatic Change in 2009 by a courageous editor who was in his final months on Earth. The paper was ultimately printed in February 2011. The initial paper is supported by subsequent papers that point out that the heat engine of civilization can be stopped only when civilization collapses. Civilization is a tricky subject, so I'll clarify what it means from the perspective of Garrett and most other sane people. Civilization refers to the set of living arrangements into which most of us were born and to which we've all become accustomed. Collapse of civilization means no fuel at the filling stations, no food at the grocery stores, and no water pouring out the municipal taps. This civilization, industrial civilization, is like all previous versions of civilization in that it depends upon the production, storage, and distribution of grains at considerable scale. Without storing food, there's no means by which humans can go into human population overshoot. There's no way to sustain a civilization. Civilizations first arose a few thousand years ago in more than half a dozen places around the globe. No civilization came into being for the first 2.8 million years of the genus Homo, or for approximately the first 200,000 years of the species Homo sapiens. And suddenly civilizations were popping up like trolls on YouTube. People within these early civilizations discovered grains such as maize and wheat, thus enabling humans to survive through the droughts and other environmental inconveniences. Large-scale production and storage of grains also allowed control of the local food supply, hence control of the people. Thus did the sociopaths assume control. They're still in control. Why did several civilizations arise essentially simultaneously a few thousand years ago? Apparently the answer to this question is found within the global average temperature of the planet. Coming out of the last ice age, the global average planetary temperature rose from 12 degrees Celsius, that's ice age, 12 degrees Celsius, to about 13.5 degrees C. More importantly, planetary temperature stabilized at that point, 1.5 degrees Celsius above ice age. This relatively cool and stable temperature allowed grains to be grown in sufficient quantities to allow the development of cities. In fact, the word city shares the same root as civilization, civitas, and the building of cities is the very definition of civilization. After all, cities allow human population overshoot, initially locally and ultimately globally, because they depend upon, the cities themselves depend upon surrounding areas for the delivery of clean air, potable water, healthy food, and the wood, bricks, and mortar by which structures are created. Not only is civilization a heat engine, even if the civilization is powered by, quote, renewable energy, but each civilization trashes the planet to provide conveniences for city dwellers. Consider, for example, the 200 or so species being driven to extinction every day, the fouling of the air, the pollution of the waters, the utter destruction of the soil, and the many other undesirable outcomes of this version of civilization. The story we tell ourselves about ourselves, to use Mike Sleeva's definition of civilization, is filled with contradictions. This civilization, like others, is characterized by endemic racism, endemic misogyny, endemic monetary disparity leading to poverty, overshoot of the human population, accelerating extinction of non-human species, and various other undesirable outcomes. Unlike other civilizations, this particular version is characterized by the infinite growth paradigm, nuclear material sufficient to cause our own extinction via multi-generational horrors resulting from lethal mutations, and also a much quicker means to our end, global dimming. Global dimming is the catch-22 of human extinction, our item number 3. Civilization is a heat engine that is in the process of killing all life on Earth. Turning off the civilization loved by techno-nerdites and those of us born into relative privilege destroys most complex life on the planet even faster than keeping it running. Allow me to explain, albeit briefly. As we all know, industrial civilization puts into the atmosphere greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide, methane, and a few others. These greenhouse gases serve as blankets that hold the heat provided by the sun close to the Earth. Very inconveniently, industrial activity also produces particulates that serve as an umbrella and protect the planet from incoming sunlight. These particulates are cooling the planet to the tune of about 3 degrees Celsius. Industrial activity constantly puts these particulates into the atmosphere, most notably by burning coal high in sulfur. The particulates constantly fall out very rapidly. If we stop burning coal and other fossil fuels, the global average temperature of Earth heats to more than 4.5 degrees Celsius above baseline in a few days. The slow rise in planetary temperature to date has destroyed habitat for myriad species, including, in many places, humans. The gradual rise in global average temperature since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution is proceeding 10,000 times faster than vertebrates can adapt, according to the stunningly conservative refereed journal literature. Abrupt climate change has recently begun. An abrupt global average rise in temperature resulting from the loss of global dimming takes Earth to more than 4.5 C above the 1750 baseline, with the vast majority of the temperature rise occurring within a few months, which surely will destroy habitat for our species and many others far faster than expected. It's difficult for me to imagine much multicellular life on our only home with a rapid rise from the current temperature to a much warmer temperature in a matter of decades, much less months. We're in the midst of the sixth mass extinction on Earth. This is item 4. The current rate of extinction of species, along with the current rise in planetary temperature, is unprecedented in planetary history. The ultra-conservative refereed journal literature caught up to the sixth mass extinction on June 19, 2015, with a paper in Science Advances. Coincident with the release of the paper, lead author Gerardo Ceballos concluded via interview, quote, "Life would take many millions of years to recover, and our species itself would likely disappear early on," end quote. Indeed, a United Nations report issued during August 2010 conservatively estimated the extinction rate of 150 to 200 species each day. Nearly 5 years later, the journal literature caught up to the ongoing genocide. The worst of the previous 5 mass extinction events occurred about 252.2 million years ago. The Great Dying was characterized by a global average rise in temperature from Ice Age, 12 degrees C, to hothouse and beyond, 23 degrees Celsius. This is the warmest temperature experienced by Earth during the last 2 billion years. It has happened once. According to my own conservative analysis from August 1st, 2016, at my blog, guymcpherson.com, we're headed for a similar temperature by mid-2026. That's in less than a decade. I simply added the primary contributors to global heating to come up with this result. According to an analysis posted on the Arctic News blog on April 24th, 2017, just a month ago, that assumes exponential temperature rise rather than simply adding up the primary contributors of temperature rise, the planet will reach 23 C, some 9.5 degrees above the 1750 baseline, in 2021. That's in 4 years. Lest you believe this is crazy, a similar analysis conducted in 2012 predicted only a global average rise in temperature of 4 C above the 1750 baseline by 2030. The analysis from 2012 has proven wildly conservative. We're headed for an ice-free Arctic, as predicted by the United States Naval Postgraduate School. This event last happened some 3 million years ago before our genus appeared on Earth. In 2013, the U.S. Navy Postgraduate School predicted an ice-free Arctic in 2016, plus or minus 3 years. We've dodged 4 bullets so far, and it appears our luck is about to run out. An ice-free Arctic, which appears imminent this summer, seems likely to trigger the 50 gigaton burst of methane from the relatively shallow seafloor of the Arctic Ocean described by field researcher Natalia Shukova and her colleagues at the European Geophysical Union meeting in 2008, when they wrote, "It is such a release of methane, 50 gigaton burst is, quote, highly possible for abrupt release at any time," end quote. Such an event would raise global average temperature beyond the temperature experienced by humans in the past, any humans, and almost certainly would cause the demise of civilization as a result of our inability to produce and store grains at large scale, thereby adding another 3 C or so to global average temperature. Thus could Earth reach 19.5 degrees C, about 6 C above the 1750 baseline of 13.5 C by next summer. That's in 14 months. People in bunkers might survive a few years. They'll be dehydrated, hungry, lonely, and living within a bleak world nearly devoid of other complex life. Their survival will be a day-to-day proposition, with every day more tenuous than the day before, much as it is today for non-human species. Or perhaps civilization will reach its overdue end as a result of demise of the petrodollar this September, consistent with the kinds of events that have occurred historically during previous Septembers. I'm not predicting this outcome, although a lot of other people are, and I'm not ruling it out. If it occurs, we can expect an abrupt global average rise in temperature well beyond the temperature at which Earth has harbored anything resembling humans. Most people dwelling in cities will die within a few days as a result of dehydration or starvation. October 1st is 120 days away. After coming to grips with this terminal diagnosis, after receiving and truly understanding this most dire of situations, then what? As item 5, I'd like to consider how we act. How do we integrate this knowledge into our lives? Who do we become? I strongly suspect we are the final humans on Earth. In light of this knowledge, will you live more fully each day, each moment? Will you become the best human you can imagine? Can you imagine that? Will you prioritize your work differently or your relationships? What is important to you? Who is important to you? Are you acting now as if these things and these beings are important to you? Are you passionately pursuing a life of excellence? Or are you on the same treadmill onto which you were born? I've thrown a lot of information at you today in a short period of time. Feel free to contact me if you'd like clarification or additional information. All my contact information is at my blog, NatureBats Last. You can find it, along with links to the evidence I've presented today, at GuyMcPherson.com. To summarize, I have 3 essential messages. Remain calm, as nothing is under control. It's certainly not under our control. The exception is the influence, perhaps bordering on control, that we have over the relatively few people we can come into contact with every day. We can ruin the day of a lot of people around us, or we can not. If we remain calm and act as if nothing is under our particular control, maybe we won't. Number 2, pursue excellence even within a culture of mediocrity. And we all have numerous examples of the mediocrity which is being accepted and even rewarded within this culture. And third, pursue love, contrary to the messages we receive every day from this culture, from the society. Because the pursuit of excellence and the pursuit of love allow us to look ourselves in the mirror at the end of each day and not be terribly embarrassed about it. Thank you very much.